The moment I saw the tattoo, I froze. I had just come back from a long training mission, weary and exhausted, expecting nothing more than a quiet reunion. Instead, there she was, standing before me, her neck adorned with a name that wasn't mine, etched in bold ink, with a Pokémon tattoo beside it. The shock hit like a freight train. Her best friend's name, the one battling aggressive cancer, was permanently inked on her skin. I hadn't been consulted, hadn't even been told. It was just done. I couldn't move, couldn't speak at first. Her words, when she spoke, were indifferent. "I got a Pokémon tattoo," she said, showing it to me, as though it were just another casual thing. But I saw the name. His name. The name of the man she'd been living with for the past 6 weeks while I was away. I went silent. My heart sank as I stood there, staring at the ink, my mind racing, trying to process what I was seeing. Without a word, I grabbed my bags and walked out. I didn't even look back. The weight of betrayal pressed down on me, suffocating me with every step I took toward the barracks. I couldn't bear to be near her. How could I? She'd moved him in while I was gone, and now she expected me to accept it all as nothing? How was that possible? She wouldn't even talk about it, wouldn't explain. All she said was, "It has nothing to do with you and me." And that was it. The divorce papers came soon after, served at our home, the one that was supposed to be ours. She had the audacity to involve both our families, but never explained why. I had filed for divorce the moment I returned from my mission, and when the calls from her parents came, I told them everything. I told them about the tattoo, about her moving him in, and I left it to them to handle. Her family, like mine, was blindsided. They hadn't known the full story, just that I had left. And then, when I spoke to my commanding officer about the situation, he didn't hesitate. "A man can't live under that level of disrespect," he said. He told me to let the paperwork go through, and that by Monday, I'd be in a new duty station. A fresh start. I agreed with him. This couldn't be salvaged. The next few days were a blur. I talked with her, tried to make sense of it all, but she seemed completely detached from reality. She honestly thought I'd just stand aside while she played house with him, just put our marriage on hold until he was gone, and then pick up where we left off. But how could I do that? How could I even entertain such a thought after everything? The thought of wasting any more time on her, after nearly 6 years of marriage, was suffocating. I was done. By June, I'd be settled into my new station, far away from all of this, hoping to finally put the past behind me. But then came her relentless attempts to reconcile. At first, it was just messages, texts, calls, nothing too intrusive. But then she escalated. She went to our families, then our friends, and eventually to people in my unit. Everyone was a target in her quest to make me listen to her excuses. It wasn't her fault, she insisted. This was just temporary. He was dying, and she was doing what any person would do for a terminally ill friend. She was just helping him, supporting him. She'd say she'd have done the same for anyone. But was that the truth? Could I even believe her anymore? Her family was no more understanding. Her parents had come to me at first, accusing me of abandoning her. All they knew was what she'd told them, that I had left her after returning from my training. When I told them about the tattoo, about the man she had moved in with, the truth started to come to light. The whole story unfolded before them, and there was no denying what had happened. The next call I got was one I never expected. My commanding officer pulled me aside in the middle of a training flight. He had bad news. My wife had taken her own life. And now, I was headed back to North Carolina. I couldn't understand it. Just a month ago, everything seemed perfect. She was the woman I loved, the one I thought I'd spend my life with. And now, she was gone. All because I couldn't accept the life she was choosing to live. It's hard to explain the emotions, rage, sadness, guilt, all tangled together. I couldn't help but wonder if I had done something different, if I had somehow prevented it. But deep down, I knew this was her choice. It wasn't about me, not in the end. Yet, the guilt gnawed at me. I kept thinking about everything, our families, the shared history between them, the years we spent together. And now, she was gone. What did it all mean? She had made her choices, but I still felt responsible somehow. Would she have made a different choice if I had just accepted it? If I had turned a blind eye to the tattoo, to the man who had replaced me in her life? I wasn't sure. And now, she was dead. And all I could do was live with the aftermath. The funeral arrangements were already in place. She had handled everything, even paid for it. It was surreal. A memorial would be held at her parents' house on Wednesday. Her ashes would need to be collected soon. As for me, I had a grief counseling session scheduled for Friday. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I couldn't face this alone. And even now, with all of this swirling in my mind, I couldn't shake the haunting question, what happened to us? The morning was already off to a rocky start when I stepped into the restaurant. I had just recently discovered that I had a gluten allergy, a truth that explained so much about the stomach pains and discomforts I'd suffered through my whole life. No more glancing over a menu and picking something I thought I could handle. Now, every meal was a meticulous decision, and any trace of gluten could set off an unpleasant chain of events, indigestion, nausea, sometimes even vomiting. So, when my friends invited me to breakfast, I had to be upfront. I couldn't just eat anywhere anymore. I needed to make sure there was a place that could cater to my needs. We found a place, a high-end breakfast spot with a separate kitchen section dedicated to gluten-free preparations. It was a small relief. Without it, I would have had to bow out entirely. The group was a couple, Emma and Vaya. Vaya, of course, was pregnant, and she wasn't feeling great. Morning sickness was taking its toll. She'd said she wasn't going to eat much, but that she could nibble from other people's plates. It was a casual suggestion, one that no one seemed to mind. But for me, it was a deal-breaker. I had my reasons, and I didn't want to share. It wasn't about being selfish. It was about boundaries. I had gone through the trouble of finding a safe place to eat, and if they wanted to share their food with each other, that was their business. But I wasn't part of that arrangement. I wasn't going to give up the only plate I could eat. I explained it clearly, and my friends understood. They agreed it was fair. But then, as our food arrived, things took a turn. Vaya, her cravings hitting hard, turned to me and asked if she could have a bite of my food. I smiled, trying to keep the peace, but I politely refused. It wasn't personal. It was just a simple matter of not wanting to share. Her pregnancy cravings weren't my responsibility. But then, the guilt started to creep in. Vaya wasn't asking for much, just a couple of bites, she said. She insisted it wasn't a big deal, that I could spare a little of my meal. Still, I stood firm. Emma, sensing the tension, suggested I give her half of my food and order more if I wasn't satisfied. Again, I refused. The gluten-free options were far more expensive than what they were eating. 2 plates just so Vaya could have some of mine? It didn't seem fair. Vaya, clearly frustrated, shot back. Just because I'm on a diet doesn't mean I can be selfish, she snapped. Everyone else was sharing, why couldn't I? But they had misunderstood. It wasn't about being selfish. It was about the fact that I couldn't share food with anyone because I couldn't guarantee it was safe for me to eat. My food was all I had. And yet, Vaya wasn't satisfied with that. She went on and on, turning the tables against me, making me feel like I was the one in the wrong for standing my ground. Finally, I lost my patience. If you've got an appetite, why not just order your own food? I said, trying to keep my voice calm. You don't need to rely on anyone else's plate. That only made it worse. Via's face twisted, her eyes filled with tears. She started to cry, her sobs echoing through the restaurant. Emma tried to calm her down, but the damage was done. The scene had become unbearable. In the end, Emma and Vaya stormed out, leaving without paying their share of the bill. I didn't feel guilty about the situation, not at first. I knew I had done nothing wrong. But then Emma sent me a message. She told me I should have just said no without making a scene. I should have kept my feelings to myself, rather than embarrassing Vaya in front of everyone. Maybe she was right. Maybe I could have handled it differently. But I wasn't about to let Vaya use her pregnancy as leverage to guilt me into sharing my food. And yet, now, I'm torn. I feel conflicted. Did I go too far? Or was I just standing up for myself? Emma and Vaya have since been distant, and the group has agreed that we won't be spending time with them anytime soon. Their behavior, since getting married, has changed. It's as if their negativity has multiplied. We've even sent them a Venmo request for their portion of the bill. We told them they could pay, or we'd never dine together again. Maybe I should have just said no and left it at that. But sometimes, it's more than just about saying no. Sometimes, it's about standing your ground.